What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for game week 10. So I'm going to go through some of the popular players that are being moved out of people's teams and being brought in and give my opinions on whether they are good moves or not, plus some alternatives as well. So let's get into it. Let's start with Reijnders, who's now back down to 5.6 million. And my general feelings with him at the moment is he's almost at that stage where I feel like he's got to go. Like, you need to probably sell him from your FPL squad. And he is still starting, so he's not like a major problem. But if he's one of your 6th or 7th attackers where you're having to play him most weeks, that doesn't feel ideal, right? As soon as you can get some money to upgrade him, that's probably what you should do. So if anyone is looking at Reijnders this week thinking, I've got cash to go to Saar or Minte or someone like that, or even Guéhi at Everton, then I think you just take that upgrade. If you're looking at Reijnders to Burma, I mean, that's just so obvious at this stage. And he is still starting, right? He got another 75 minutes at the weekend against Villa. But you almost need him to get a few more minutes than that. And you also need one of Nico Gonzalez or Rodri to play regularly so that Reijnders can get forward more. So he just feels like a bit of an issue to deal with. You know, the minutes have come down a bit. Who knows, eventually, that may even turn into the odd benching here or there. The attacking stats are like fine for less than 6 million, but nothing to get excited about. He's certainly not a game breaker, far from it. And you've got Liverpool in 11, which to be fair might not be that bad, and then Newcastle away in 12. So in some ways I look at it and think, okay, Bournemouth's okay, Liverpool might be okay if they keep defending as they have been, and then from 13 onwards the fixtures get good. But there's just so many other midfielders I'd rather have instead. And obviously if you've got if you've got like unlimited budget, there's always better players you can have. But in this case, I think most people can get to someone better. Minte or Saar or Guéhi or Enzo Fernandez or Bruno Fernandes or Mbeumo or Saka. There's a lot of good midfielders right now. And you could turn around and say, Andy, he's only 5.6. What are you worried about? Agreed, if he's your 8th attacker and you're not having to play him much. If you're having to play him most weeks, I just think you can do better. So I won't have him down as a major problem because he continues to start, but the minutes are not what they were earlier on, and the output's just probably not going to be there in a huge way where I'd want to play him that regularly. So we've got to talk about the guy that ruined my FPL weekend in game week 9, and that is Mickey van der Ven. I mean, to be fair, my own team also ruined my weekend by not getting me any points as normal, but Van der Ven's ownership is so high, over 30%. And going into that final game between Spurs and Everton in game week 9, I had a very small red arrow with Kiernan Dewsbury Hall in play, and I came out with a massive red. 2 goals, clean sheet, and defensive contributions for the first time this season. Absolute nightmare if you didn't own him. And now we've got to talk about whether you should sell him if you're an owner or whether you should buy him if you're not. If you already own him, you've probably got no intentions to sell him. And to be honest, I completely get it. Unless you're absolutely desperate for that defender spot, where you've got like 4 other defenders that you can't sell, but you want to get an Arsenal defender or a Munoz or someone like that, so you've got to sell Van der Ven. Unless you're in that particular situation, you probably just want to keep him, right? If you had to play him against Man United at home in game week 11, not the end of the world. I don't necessarily expect a clean sheet for Spurs in that game, but Thomas Frank has shown that he can set them up in a defensive way, make them difficult to break down. They're much better defensively than they were last year. Then you've got Fulham at home in 13, Brentford at home in 15, and at 4.7 million, he's benchable. You could bench him against Chelsea this week, Arsenal away in 12, Newcastle away in 14, and play him in the 3 home games. Now, some people might turn around and say, why would I want to bench him because of the goal threat? He has scored 3 goals already this season, and obviously set pieces is something that Spurs have worked on. I'm not quite sure he's in the Gabriel bracket just yet, where you want to play him every week, because Gabriel has got that goal threat we've seen over many seasons, but also Arsenal defence is just ridiculously good, so he's got both. And Spurs defence is good, but it's not Arsenal levels. And Van der Ven is a threat, but I'm not sure he's Gabriel yet. So I think he is still benchable, but some of that might be a little bit of a bias because of the price. Like if Van der Ven was 5.5, 6 million, would I still be saying bench him? Maybe not, but I think he is in that position where he is benchable. So if you've got him, unless you're desperate for the defender spot, you probably keep hold of him. Should anyone be buying him with Chelsea at home, Arsenal away, Newcastle away next 5? Probably not. The only way I would maybe see a situation where it would make sense. Let's say you've got someone like Van Dijk and you really want to downgrade him to get money for a midfield move. Like let's say it's Van Dijk and Reijnders to a cheap defender and Saar or something like that. then maybe you could pick up Van de Ven as a longer term pick. But even in that case, someone like Everton, Michael Keane, maybe defensively not quite so good, but his goal threat's decent. Sunderland away this week, or maybe like a Richards at Crystal Palace. If you want to play the defender regularly, they've got better fixtures over the next kind of 5 or 6. So, yeah, I would not be rushing out to buy Van de Ven despite the ridiculous score he put up. But I can kind of see some situations where maybe it makes sense. But if you've got him, I probably would not be going out of my way to sell him. And yeah, I'm a little bit gutted that I didn't go there at the start of the season. But obviously, there's a bit of hindsight there. But it's natural when a guy goes and gets 2 goals and a clean sheet and defensive contributions. Absolute nightmare, this guy. Let's stick to Spurs and talk about Mohamed Kudus next. 6.8 million. At this stage, no one should be buying him, I would say. I think there are better midfielders to go to, like Ismail Assar at Crystal Palace, for example. I'd even probably rather pick up Gyökeres this week than Kudus, just because of the fixtures and the fact he's on penalties. Spurs have got that Chelsea at home, Man United at home, Arsenal away next 3. So no one should be buying him. There's probably some people out there that are considering selling as well. I think someone that always starts is never going to be like a huge problem for you. Even though the weekend just gone against Everton was the first time he was subbed before the 80th minute, I don't necessarily see that as a sign of things to come. I think most of the time he's going to play close to 90. So not a massive problem, but I would be edging towards selling him if you've got the spare transfer. The fixtures are not great coming up, and at 6.8 million, there are definitely better midfielders. And Kudus has done pretty well so far this season. I think it's 6 attacking returns. Yeah, 1 goal, 5 assists. But there is definitely an overperformance there on the creative side. Like his expected assists per 90, 0.14. His assists per 90, actual assists, 0.57. Massive overperformance that is unlikely to continue. And he doesn't really have the goal threat either. I spoke about this in pre-season. Kudus, and this is broken record alert, I think I've said this for 2 or 3 seasons, great player to watch. The stats are never that great. And he'll always do okay because he always plays 90 minutes, or usually does. But I just don't find him that exciting for FPL. I just don't think that output will continue at that level, especially with the fixtures changing as well. So if you've got the transfer to move to Sarr, or you want to move to, even like if you want to save some money and go Minte at Brighton, or you've got some spare money in the bank and you want to go to Mburma or someone like that, I just think it makes sense. I just think this is a nice jump-off point for him. And also, his ownership's quite high. And in some cases, I think it's worth fighting against ownership. And Kudus is one of those. I think his ownership's probably a little bit too high for what he offers. And so I'd rather back against that. I've got no intention to buy him anytime soon. I haven't owned him all season, which hasn't been ideal at times. But I think he's okay to go against. So if you're thinking about selling him, I completely get it and I'd probably do it. Not for a hit though. So I want to talk about Gabriel at Arsenal. Let's get the easy stuff out of the way first. No one should be selling him anytime soon. It shouldn't even be a thought that crosses your mind unless he picks up an injury. And even then, it would probably have to be long term to justify selling him. If you don't have him and you've got a spare Arsenal slot and you've got the money, that should probably be your priority transfer this week. Because once he goes in, you just set and forget. You never think about him again unless he picks up an injury, because Arsenal are capable of a clean sheet in pretty much any game. He's such a threat from set pieces. And he's added defensive contributions to his game this year. He's averaging 8.89 per start. You only need to hit 10 to get the additional 2 points. So he's not going to do it every game, obviously, but he's going to do it way more often than we thought he would based on last year's numbers. So not only are the clean sheets high and the attacking threat high, he's now got defensive contributions as well. Like, he is the best Arsenal pick. If I was wildcarding this week, he'd be the first name in the team, or one of the first names. Definitely the first name from Arsenal ahead of Saka. Saka's really good, but Gabriel, he's the best defender in the game. So if you've got a spare slot, you just pick him up. The harder conversation is, do you take a hit to do it? And what if you've already got 3 Arsenal? And one of them's not Gabriel? Do you sell one of them to get Gabriel? On the hit, I'm not super against hits, but I don't tend to do them unless I absolutely need to. And I think that's still the case with Gabriel, even with how good he is. Like, you can always make the move next week. So if you're in a position where your defense looks okay, and so does the rest of your team, and it would take a hit to get Gabriel, but you could do it next week for free, then I would probably delay the move. But if you've got a terrible defense, or you need to sort out an injury, and it would just give you less of a headache to have Gabriel in your team, I don't completely hate it. If the hit's for a non-Arsenal player, if the hit is to take out an Arsenal player to switch, And by the way, the Arsenal player is likely to start against Burnley. I don't like that because you're taking a hit to take out a good player to get another good player. And yes, I think Gabriel is the best of the lot, but I don't think I would take that hit. So maybe if your defence is bad or you need to sort out an injury and you just want to get a long-term pick in Gabriel -4, I would do it. If it's for an Arsenal player that's going to start against Burnley, I'd be less sure about that. Even if it's Gyökeres or Eze, I don't think I would take the hit. What if you've got 3 Arsenal players and none of them are Gabriel? Would I use transfers to swap him? Maybe. Okay, so let's say it's Timber, for example. Would I do Timber to Gabriel? If I've got nothing else to do, or I've got lots of transfers saved up, like 3, 4, or 5. If I've got one free transfer and my team looks perfect and I'm not going to need any more moves the next couple of weeks, then yes, I would do it. If you've got something else to deal with, like an injury or just a terrible pick elsewhere, and you've got, like, Timber's still good. He's not Gabriel, but he's still very good. So it is, like, there's lots of different scenarios, and I'm sure we'll go through some of them on the deadline stream, where for one person I would do the move and one that I wouldn't. But with Timber, I think it's a luxury move, basically. If you've got Calafiori or Saliba and they go into the weekend as a doubt because they both came off with knocks in that game against Crystal Palace, then I just do it. Because Gabriel is better than both of them anyway, and it just makes your life easier. So in that case, I would do it. If you've got... I wouldn't remove Saka to get Gabriel, for what it's worth. If you've got Gyökeres or Eze, again, I wouldn't do it for a hit, but if you could do it for free, I'd be tempted. Like, if you could do Gyökeres to Mateta and a defender up to Gabriel, so you get Gabriel in, you get Mateta, who's great, for 2 free transfers, I'd probably do that. Like, that feels like a good move. Don't get me wrong, Gyökeres is not a problem this week against Burnley. He's going to start and he'd probably play 90 minutes. I'm not going to sell him from my own team. But if I can have Mateta and Gabriel or Gyökeres and, like, a defender that's not great, there's only one route I'm going. So I'd probably do that. Same with Eze. Like, if you had Eze and a defender you're not happy with, and you could switch Eze to Sarr, someone like that, and get Gabriel, again, it's just worthwhile. Because Gyökeres and Eze, very, very unlikely to be part of the best 3 Arsenal long term. Gabriel definitely will be. So, yeah, I think I've covered most bases there. I'm sure there's something else that I've forgotten about. Like Raya. Like, if you had Raya, let's say you've got Raya, Timber, Saka, which a lot of you will have, which one would I sell? I feel like if you could do Timber to Gabriel in one move, that's probably the one I would go for. Because if you sell either of the others, it's definitely 2 transfers. And if you sell Raya, which goalkeeper do you go to? Maybe Pope could be okay. Like, I quite like Raya as like a long-term hold. I guess I'd probably say... The easier you can get Gabriel in, the better. So if you could do Timber in one move, that's probably better than using 2 to sell Raya. Even though I do like Timber and Gabriel doubler. It's a complicated situation. I could be here all day going through different scenarios. I try and sum it up. Free slot, just get him. Hit, be careful with it, but I'm not completely against it. And if you have to sell an Arsenal player, I do it for free, but I probably wouldn't do it for a hit. And if it's Saka, I wouldn't sell him. And if it's Timber, I'd maybe do it begrudgingly. But I would, like... Honestly, if you've got Timber and another problem in your team, don't do Timber to Gabriel, in my opinion. Sort the other problem out first and then come back to it later, because Timber's still good. Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get comments, what about this specific scenario? But I'll have to try and cover them on the Game Week preview or the deadline stream. But hopefully that just... I just think there's going to be a lot of talk about Gabriel this week, despite his ownership already being pretty high. Because there will be people out there without him, and the scores he's got recently... It's getting more and more difficult to not have him. He's the best defender in the game. It's not even up for debate, in my opinion. If you can get him in a good way that preferably doesn't require a hit and doesn't have a detrimental effect on the rest of your team, i.e. you're leaving other problems, you should probably just get him this week and just leave him for a long time. So I want to briefly talk about Victor Gyökeres, who I just mentioned there. He has been massively frustrating to own. He's now on a run of 5 2-pointers in a row. So I wildcarded him in Game Week 4, and he scored against Nottingham Forest, got a 6-pointer, no bonus. And I thought maybe this is a sign of things to come. Since then, every Game Week, 2 points. That is it. Like, he is far from value at 9 million. And I think he's got to be sold pretty soon, but not necessarily this week, just because it's Burnley away. Like, for 9 million, you're getting a guy putting up 0.32 expected goals per 90. I've got to be honest, that's pretty rubbish, considering he plays for Arsenal. I would expect Arsenal's number 9 to get more chances than that. And he has got more chances in some games. But on average, over all the games he's played so far, 0.32 per 90. That's terrible. And I'm not even saying that he's played badly, because I know he's doing a good job for Arsenal. Arsenal fans are fairly happy with him. They're winning games. He's doing a lot of work, etc. It's not to kind of put the guy down. But for FPL, we want goals and assists from our attackers. And Gyökeres is just not providing that. And he's not really getting the chances either. So I would say soon he's going to have to be sold for one of two reasons. One, Havertz will be back, and that will eat into his minutes. Or two, he's got to be sold because he's just not value, and there's better ways to spend your money. Now, you don't need to sell him before Burnley away. I know how Burnley are going to defend, just like they did against Liverpool. They'll try and make it difficult, but on paper, it's still a really good fixture. I would not go out of my way to sell him this week unless you want to free up a spot for Saka or Gabriel, in which case maybe you can do it. And you don't even necessarily need to sell him before Sunderland. I know Sunderland have done really well, but it's still not a terrible fixture. And then you've got the international break. And then from 12 onwards, it's much more likely that Havertz will be an issue. So I think he's going to be sold soon. I'm just not sure it's this week. But as I mentioned with Gabriel, if you want to do a move like Gyökeres and Mateta to free up a spot to get Saka or Gabriel, I mean, that's great. Or even if you want to downgrade Gyökeres to someone super cheap like Krupa Jr. or Guéhi and just free up the money and to free up the Arsenal slot, I don't hate it. I wouldn't do it for a hit. There's no way I would sell Gyökeres this week for a -4. I can't think of many scenarios where that would be the case. And then in game week 11, you can decide what to do. For my team, I might even sell him in 11. I might just have enough at that point, or I keep him one more week and then decide what to do over the international break. So super frustrating. If he continues these numbers in terms of expected goals, we shouldn't expect great things from him moving forward. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. Right. And maybe that's what will happen. But we're not really seeing the signs at the moment. He's taken, I think, between 2 and 3 shots a game. It's fine. It's not amazing, though. So for Burnley, keep him. Sunderland, maybe keep him. After that, I think he's got to go from a value perspective, or because Havertz is eating into his game time. So let's discuss Mark Guéhi, because I think recently, whenever I've had a question about Crystal Palace or I've covered them in a topic, I've pretty much said Munoz, Sarr, Mateta, my favourite 3. If you want to go a little bit cheaper in defence, just get Reijnders because he's good for defensive contributions and he's only 4.5 million. And when I say that, someone always says, why are you writing off Mark Guéhi? Why are you not talking about him as an option? And maybe that is a little bit unfair because he has done really well this season in terms of the attacking output. There is some defensive contribution potential there as well. I think it's mostly because he's gone up to 4.9. So when I look at Reijnders at 4.5, he's better for defensive contributions per start. Like he's over 10 on average, whereas Guéhi is 8.44. So Reijnders is going to pick up the DEFCONs more often than Guéhi based on what we've seen so far. But if any of the defenders are going to get rotated in any game, it is Reijnders. Like he does often get a bit of a break in European matches. Guéhi and Lacroix, it's probably not going to happen. So maybe when we get to like the midweek fixtures, say game week 14, if Glasner wants to make a slight change in defence to give someone a rest, it's probably going to be Reijnders rather than the rest of them. Like game week 12, Wolves away, that is after an international break. Could Reijnders maybe get benched? It's a possibility. I don't think it's that likely, but I guess he's more likely to get benched than Guéhi or Lacroix. So perhaps for that reason, it is worth paying a little bit more. And then you've got the attacking output on top of that. One thing with Crystal Palace, I think Reijnders takes a lot of the long throws. So he's never going to be on the end of a flick on or on the end of a chance in the box. He may well be on a free kick or a corner, but not on those long throws. So attacking wise, Guéhi is better. He's definitely overperformed. He's not going to keep up this number of assists, etc. But actually, his own personal attacking numbers are quite good. 0.1 expected goals per 90, 0.08 expected assists. So he is quite a threat for 4.9 million. You know he's always going to start, and he's not bad for DEFCONs. So Guéhi is an option at 4.9 if you can't afford Munoz and you want to go a bit more in, like a bit more of a, I was going to say flair pick, but a slightly more exciting pick than Reijnders. You could go for Guéhi, but let me bring to you Lacroix instead. Now I own Lacroix, and I've been a little bit frustrated with him, and I kind of wish I had Munoz instead. But I think if you can't afford Munoz, I think Lacroix is definitely an option versus Guéhi. And this is why, right? If we look at the stats on Hub, as always, if you want to check this tool out and all the other ones, link in the description below. For Guéhi, I've just mentioned DEFCONs per start, 8.44. Lacroix went down in price last night, so he's only 0.1 million more than Guéhi. And he's much lower owned. So he's 5 million. His DEFCONs per start are 11. So Richards and Lacroix, on average, are better for picking up defensive contributions than Guéhi. And again, Lacroix is only 0.1 million more. And when you look at his goal threat, he's at 0.08 expected goals per 90. So he's not far off the goal threat of what Guéhi's had so far this season. And also, when you look at previous seasons, so if I go back to 2024-25, Lacroix's pretty steady at like 0.1. Whereas I think Guéhi, I've not actually checked this, I think last season he was a little bit lower. Yeah, 0.06. So I guess what I'm trying to say is defensive contributions, Lacroix's better than Guéhi on average, and he's only 0.1 million more. And when you look at the attacking threat this season, they're both quite close. But last season, Lacroix was better. So do we take that longer sample size from last year and say that Lacroix for 0.1 million is the better pick? So I don't know. I know it feels sometimes like I'm just constantly writing off specific players. Like I almost never mention Guéhi as an option at Palace, and people think I think he's terrible. I don't, but I still just think for 4.5, you get Richards, who's better for Defcons. Or if you want to spend the money for the security of starts every single game, yes, Guéhi's good, but for 0.1 more, Lacroix is lower owned. Like Guéhi's ownership's 32.4 overall, but Lacroix is 3.7. And he's going to pick up more DEFCON points. And his goal threat, in my opinion, is just as good. I won't even necessarily say it's better, but I don't think it's worse. So if you've got the 0.1, surely you just go Lacroix and hope that he gets you the goal soon rather than Guéhi. So I think Guéhi's a good pick. I'll say that. But I still think if I'm looking at the list of Palace players, I'd probably put Minor, Sarr, Mateta ahead of him and Lacroix just because of the price drop last night. And then because of security starts, maybe Guéhi's ahead of Richards, but Richards is obviously cheaper. So Guéhi's fine if you want to buy him. But I think if I was wildcarding, I don't think I would consider him, to be honest. Let's talk about Woltemade next, who's now up to 7.5 million. Finally blanked at the weekend. It feels like it's ages since he's done that. I think he is a don't sell, don't buy. Or don't sell, probably don't buy, depending on your squad structure. So West Ham away next. I don't think there's a really great case to get rid of any Newcastle players unless they're not going to start, because West Ham away is such a good fixture at the moment. So I definitely wouldn't sell him. In terms of the probably don't buy, I don't hate it, right? He probably is one of the better forward picks right now. But at that 7.5 million price point, Mateta for me is clearly better. Like 3 of the next 4 for Newcastle are away. West Ham, Brentford, Everton. And then the home game in Game Week 12 is Man City. Now, as always, individually, West Ham, Brentford, Everton, not massive problems. But as a combination of fixtures to target, that next 4 is okay. But it's nothing to get massively excited about. And Visser could be back soon. Now, to be honest, I don't see Visser as a massive problem. He's not played at all. Eddie Howe said he's going to need 6 weeks basically as a pre-season. But he could eat into the minutes a little bit. And I just think if you're going to buy Woltemade, you've got to be really confident that he is definitely a great option. Because if you're unsure, surely you wait until this fixture run's gone, wait and see what happens with Visser, and then make a decision closer to that Game Week 15 Burnley at home game. I don't know what it is, right? Sometimes you just have a bit of intuition, or maybe it's not even intuition. There's something about Woltemade which tells me I don't need to rush out and buy him. Call it a gut feeling, whatever you want. It's just, I don't know, something about him. I think Haaland is obviously great. I think if you can afford Mateta, you go for him. And then to have Woltemade as your third forward, it's fine if that's how your structure is set up, but I wouldn't be going out of my way to move to that. Let's say you're on a structure where you've got Haaland, Mateta, and a really cheap forward. I'd rather just make a single move in midfield to buy someone there rather than a double move to get Woltemade. So it's all going to depend on your structure. Let's say you've got Haaland, João Pedro, Bowen, and you're sick of João Pedro and Bowen, and you want to go to Mateta and Woltemade. That might make sense, especially if you're short on transfers. But I don't, for most people, Woltemade as a third forward is probably not going to work. And I wouldn't sell Woltemade to Mateta. Like I said, I would keep him for West Ham away, and then you probably keep him for Brentford away. But I don't think I'll be buying. It's just a gut feeling. I don't know. I think he's fine, but not much more than that right now. On the cheaper end of the forwards, you've got Igor Thiago at 6.2 million for Brentford, who does look like he's going to be pretty good value over the course of this season, especially now we know that he's back on penalties ahead of Schade. So 6.2 million, first choice number 9 for Brentford. The minutes are good. He's on penalties. He is just good value. That being said, I don't really see a rush to go out and buy him with the fixtures. Like next 6, outside of that Burnley at home game in game week 13, 4 of them are away, and they're not easy. Palace, Brighton, Arsenal and Spurs. The only other home game apart from Burnley in the next 6 is Newcastle, which isn't easy either. So Palace away, Newcastle at home, Brighton away, next 3. I don't see a rush to get Thiago unless you happen to be looking for a sub 6.5 million forward, in which case he might arguably be the best one, because his minutes will probably be better than Welbeck long term. And I think Calvert-Lewin is just one of those players that people get too frustrated by. I still think for 0.7 less for a player that's probably on penalties as well, Calvert-Lewin's not terrible, but I understand for most people, he's just frustrating to own. So Thiago is where you want to go. So sub 6.5, if that's really what you need a playing forward, he is probably the one. But I just wouldn't rush out to break your squad up or get him in outside of really needing someone that cheap because of the fixtures. Like if you own Thiago and you've got to play him against Palace or Newcastle or Brighton or even all 3, you're not worried about it. But to target it, I don't really get it. Also, Haaland's number 1 forward. For a lot of people, and again, he's not essential, but for a lot of people, Mateta's probably number 2. So then Thiago's your 3rd forward. Or you're going for Thiago instead of someone like Mateta or Woltemade as your 2nd forward. That I'm not so sure about. Like a guy that's 6.2 million that always plays on penalties, never going to be a terrible option. But as a 3rd forward, I'm not so sure. I just think midfield is where it's at right now. I know some people disagree with that. I was listening to James on Planet FPL. He's pretty confident there's a lot of forwards right now. And there are, to be fair, like Haaland, Mateta, Woltemade, Thiago, maybe Calvert-Lewin. There's probably some I've forgotten as well. Krupa Jr. if he keeps playing. But I just feel like if I rattle off a bunch of names off the top of my head in the forward lines versus midfielders, I just prefer a lot more midfielders. So if I'm going to tank a spot, I prefer tanking the forward spot than a midfield spot. So, if you've got bench boost left to play, then obviously you want to play forward. So Thiago 3rd forward is fine. But for most people, I'm not sure it's great. And I think Mateta's better as a 2nd forward. I'd also prefer to have Woltemade, I think, as a 2nd forward. Unless I'm really looking to save cash. So again, it sounds like I think Thiago's a bad pick. And far from it. I actually had him in one of my drafts in pre-season, which did not go down well. But now we know his minutes are good and he's on penalties. Like he's just a good pick for 6.2. I don't know, you just come back to it later. I'm not even sure when Brentford's fixtures get good, apart from obviously that Burnley game. And you could rotate him. 16, you've got Leeds at home, Wolves away, Bournemouth at home, Spurs at home, Everton away, Sunderland. I mean, that looks like a really good run. You can maybe pick him up in 13, possibly bench him against Arsenal, and then just play him after that. It looks good. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, different opinions, right? There's a lot of people that think the forwards are great. I personally just think if you're going to tank a spot, that's where you do it. And so you come back to him later. Like he's fine. He's good value at 6.2, but would not be rushing out to buy him. And then we've got Enzo Fernandez. There was quite a bit of hype about him before game week 8, but obviously then he had that injury doubt and didn't play. And then the hype kind of died down, even though he had Sunderland at home in 9. But then he's played that game and he's blanked. So he's a bit of a weird one. The hype has completely gone, but he's still probably quite a good pick. 6.7 million, regularly playing 90 minutes. No Cole Palmer, who's probably on penalties. The underlying numbers are pretty good. I think he is still a decent pick. Would I go for him this week? Probably not, because it's Spurs away. If you're going to go and buy him, it's probably game week 11 when it's Wolves at home, Burnley away. And for anyone considering free hit 13, you would dodge the Arsenal game, then come straight back to Leeds. So I still quite like him, but if you're going to buy him, it's next week. If you've got him, I would definitely keep. Enzo Maresca did mention the other day, I think Caicedo, Enzo, Fernandez, and João Pedro are all players that aren't training completely properly, which is not ideal because that means they're not necessarily playing at 100%. But Enzo is still getting really good minutes. And when you look at that Sunderland game, it was obviously disappointing for Chelsea, but he still created some chances. He still had more shots than João Pedro, although that's basically everyone in the Chelsea team. So I still like him. So I wouldn't buy him this week. If you're going to do it, probably... Like, it's not terrible to buy him this week, but the window really now is Wolves at home, and I don't hate that. And if you've got him, I'd definitely hold on to him. I still think for the less than 7 million price tag, he's still pretty good value. I'm going to leave that one there. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. If you've got any different opinions to what I've said, leave a comment below as well. And I'll be back tomorrow with the game week preview.